British and US intelligence say Iranian troops are on the ground in Crimea supporting Russian drone attacks on Ukraine. It comes as the Ukrainian military continues a counter-offensive in the strategic Kherson region, an area that was annexed and put under martial law by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, let's have a look in a bit more detail on the situation on the ground. We're joined now by retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, good to see you again. Well, a big picture sort of breakdown for us, first of all, on that situation on the ground.
Yeah, I mentioned Kherson, start off there. The Ukrainians are tightening the noose around the tens of thousands of Russian troops that are held up in there. Russian officials have been told to leave by the Kremlin, and there's also reports of some of the Russian soldiers running around in civilian attire. Almost certainly is that so they can get off away from Kherson without attracting the attention of the media. General Surovikin, who's the most senior Russian general looking after all the Russian forces in Ukraine, has hinted that the situation is not going well in Kherson, which is unheard of, that they would admit such weakness. But it seems to be setting the conditions for a Russian withdrawal from the city. We'll have to wait and see. Interestingly, President Zelensky has also accused Russia of mining the Kakhovka hydroelectric plant dam. This dam, right up in the top here, provides one of the very few crossing points for the Dnieper River for the Russians, because obviously all the bridges have been blown elsewhere. Now, if the Russians were to blow that dam, which they've actually occupied for since the start of the war, that will cause massive flooding down the Dnieper River, but also all the way around Kherson. What looks most likely is if the Russians are planning to withdraw, if they were to blow that dam, they would flood that river, flood Kherson, and therefore cover their retreat. The challenge would be it also devastate water supplies to the south of Ukraine, and also that's where the cooling water for the reactors at Zaporizhzhia comes from.
Let's touch as well, Sean, on that issue of reports that there are Iranian troops in Crimea helping the Russian operate drones. I mean, how significant is that?
Yeah, the last 10 days, the Russians have been focusing on targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure all across the country. Let's be fair, these are not military targets. It's much more about terrorising the military population, the civilian population. They've been using these Iranian drones, these Shahib 136. We've covered them in some detail on previous days. You tend to think of drones as being slow with very limited endurance. These drones, they're generally launched out of Crimea, but their range is well over 1,000 miles, and that takes them anywhere in the country of Ukraine. Might take quite a long time to get there, but they've certainly got the range for that. Iran has deployed some extra people, military expertise, to support the operation of the Russians of operating these drones out of Crimea. And as a result of that technical support and the arrival of these drones, both the UK and the US have imposed additional sanctions on Iran.
And then, Sean, just talk us through the significance of that story that Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, told us about yesterday from a few weeks ago, where a British aircraft, nearly got shot down by a Russian aircraft, or is that's the wrong phrase?
Well, it's an amazing story, this, because the event happened on the 29th of September, over 3 weeks ago, but it was only announced by Ben Wallace yesterday. An Su-27 flanker, we've got a picture of one here, Russian fighter aircraft, released a missile very close to a Royal Air Force aeroplane that was operating just over the Black Sea. The target was a Royal Air Force RC-135, a Rivet joint aeroplane. We've got a picture of one here. These provide the eyes and the ears over the battlefield. They routinely fly over the Black Sea, a crew of about 30 on board. The Russians claim that this was a result of a technical malfunction. Well, as you know, I'm a former fighter pilot myself, and I can tell you that technical malfunctions do not lead to the firing of missiles. That is completely implausible. What's much more likely is the Russians are very frustrated at the West's use of air and space power to support Ukraine, and as a result, they've almost certainly been trying to try their luck. The flights of the RC-135 have resumed again, but now they have Typhoon aircraft providing armed escort. But if this story had turned out differently, if the Russians had been successful, if the missile had hit this target, it would have massively escalated the whole situation, and we'd be covering a very different story.
We certainly would. Sean, thanks so much, as always.